This is a project I've been working on for 30 years. What I'm doing is looking at different animals that I can come across and trying to find out, is there any evidence for the evolution of these animals? And guess what? Everyone I've looked at, and probably 70 or 80 now, everyone I've looked at, there's no evidence for their evolution. In fact, most of the articles say the first squirrel was a squirrel, the first turtle was a turtle. There's no evidence for turtle evolution, etc. Someday, as I keep looking, I'm going to find one that there's actually some evidence for their evolution. But so far, I don't have to worry. Let me mention a few of my work here. As you mentioned, I am now a Methodist pastor, and I wrote this book called The Methodist Darwin Syndrome. And I'm explaining in here what happened to not just the Methodist Church, but many of the churches. Most of the members are creationists, or at least many are. And many of the pastors are creationists. The problem is the higher level hierarchy. And I go into detail. I go into 3 levels. The first, they condone slavery. The second, they condone eugenics. And the last, they condone evolution. And the worst mistake of all 3 of those is condoning evolution. And I document that in quite a few pages. So if you get a chance to look at that, that would be great. And this one I just finished, Apes as Ancestors. And it's got lots of pages in it. It's got almost 400 pages. And it was actually 900, and we couldn't put 900 pages in a standard size, and so they doubled the size of the pages, so they got it all in. This book is the first and only book from a creationist position that carefully documents every single claim of evolution of humans from apes. We did that by looking at the scientific peer-reviewed literature and found the literature is very clear. What happens is I make a discovery and I think this is a missing link and I write articles about it and I become famous and National Geographic gives me a grant to go back to Africa to dig up some more fossils, and I'm convinced that I found the missing link. Then my colleagues criticize my findings and show, indeed, that my findings are not valid. And so what we did is we took each finding and then we analyzed the criticism of those findings. And so we have about 4,000 references to peer-reviewed paleontological literature showing that their fellow paleontologists have shown that the claims of ape to human evolution are false. Of course, now these scientists who dispute Artie, for example, which is one that's in here, they dispute Artie, but they have their own theory. They have their own missing link. So we have a lot of paleontologists that criticize each other, and one of the most disastrous finds is Lucy, because we just show beyond a doubt that Lucy is just clearly a monkey, and there's just no evidence that she, and they think she was a he, have evidence for her evolution. And so and that's one of the chapters I wrote. By the way, I wrote this with several other people, and it's carefully documented. Now, there are several other books that deal with the same thing, but they're kind of a brief summary. This goes into the peer-reviewed literature, and some of the chapters are hard to follow, and so I insisted for each contribution we need a summary, so you get a good idea what the results are from reading that summary. So on Amazon, I think it's $45, so I order a couple hundred at a time, and I get an author's discount, so I sell it for my cost, which is about $20. So pick it up if you can. And for free, if you buy a book, you get this book free. This is my first novel, and so far I've had more positive feedback about this than any book I've written. Possibly because it's only 170 pages. and it's a novel. It's what?
Is that your shortest book?
Yeah, it's my shortest book, yeah. And I was at the Quinton Road Baptist Church Sunday, And I had 2 services. I had the Sunday school, which was 10, and the regular service, which is 11. And after the service was over, I was by my book table, and I had a person come up and said, you know, during the service, I read almost your whole book. And it was really good, she added. It's a page-turner. It's written, by the way, for women. My publisher said, you know, 70% of all books, novels, are written by women and bought by women. And so if you want it to be successful, you've got to write it for women. So you better be careful and not say anything unkind about women. You better be nice to women because they are the ones that are going to read it. But I've had some males read it, and they were pretty positive as well. So pick up a copy, just buy. Now, if you don't want to buy anything except this, I can sell this for $10. I think on Amazon it's $16.95. I don't determine the price. The hardback on Amazon is $30-some. I don't know why you'd want to pay $30 for this book, but that's what they want for it, so I can't really. They make the determination. Okay, let the animal speak. This is a presentation I've given many times to Christian schools, and I've had the first level, which is first, second, and third grade, go through it, and they enjoyed it, so I figure, well, you must enjoy it as well. And I cover animals that are really difficult to prove, but yet should not be, like the armadillo. The armadillo has this armor, this solid cover, and that preserves very well in the fossil record. And there are lots of armadillos out west. There are huge numbers. And so therefore, if they indeed evolved, we should find evidence for them. But what do we find? No evidence for them at all. And according to this author who studies armadillos, he said of all living animals, few are as amazing as the armadillos, is what he said. Okay. And Carol Linnaeus, he was the founder of taxonomy, and he couldn't figure out where in the world we put these animals. What are they? Are they a reptile? Are they a bird? Well, they're not a bird, but they have bird traits. What do we do with them? We know now that they are shy, timid mammals, so they are classified as mammals. Not because they are really mammals, but they just, where else do you put them? So that's what they did. And David Lamb calls these critters bizarre, and in many ways they're but really, in many ways they're neat. They, for example, when they encounter enemies, they literally roll up into a ball, and the ball is like that, and you can't get in there. I guess if you had a drill and pliers, maybe you could get in there, but when you see this ball somewhere on the, where they live in the desert in Arizona, it looks just like a ball. It's amazing they can fold up like that, and yet they function as armadillos. I'm told by the last group I was at that their meat tastes really, really good. So, anyways, they're not really cute, but on the other hand, besides baffling, and evolutionists, they say, are stymied about its origins, we have nary a clue as to how they even could have evolved. They can't even guess where it could have evolved from. I mean, they can't even make a guess that's reasonable, or even one that's unreasonable. They just have no idea. And the armored plates, of course, are unique features that are well preserved, but no evidence of them in the fossil record. And I'm not sure if they're cute, but somebody must like them. The male must like them, but if that's a female, I'm not sure if that's female. I have no idea how you tell the difference, but I guess they can because they're still around. They reproduce pretty effectively. But Smith said they are an endless collection of oddities. Their armor plates consist of small, overlapping epidermal scales composed of bone. They're made out of bone, which is interesting. They're covered with a hard horn that has the distinct appearance of a turtle shell. And the last time I presented this, they said you need to mesh the pictures with the text. And this is an older PowerPoint, so I need to get a newer PowerPoint and do that. So next time I give this, they'll be meshed together, which will make it easier. And in order to evolve the armadillos from anything else, you have a lot of major design changes, hundreds, to effectively evolve them. And just a few I'll mention. One is the respiratory and thermoregulatory alterations. They don't exactly have skin you can breathe through, and so you have mechanical changes required, so they roll up into a ball, and they have to breathe, have to escape enemies, and reproduce, and that is a challenge. And we should see evidence at lower fossil record of the beginning of their evolution, but it's not there. And last and even larger shell exists until the modern shell that covers almost the entire animal evolved. That's the theory. So we should see evidence of it evolving from a small shell to a shell that covers almost the entire animal, and we don't see that. And they must swallow to inflate air in their stomach to twice its normal size so they can float in the water. So they have another way of getting away from predators. They just float around. And unless the predators can swim, and many can't, they're safe in the water. So they really have a number of defenses which works pretty well. In fact, the major problem they have is getting run over by cars. In fact, in the last time I presented this, somebody was from Arizona, and they were very familiar with this. And they said, when you ask where are armadillos found, they said, on the road somewhere. But anyways, in cold climates, they trap air beneath their shell to reduce heat loss to survive in the coldest of winter days. So they're found in very warm climates and very cold climates. And one guess as to where they evolved from, and I'll let you judge this, is from the glyptodons. In fact, the glyptodons look kind of like armadillos, and they have a similar covering, and they look like a cross between a turtle and an armadillo, but they're about the same size as a Volkswagen. There's a picture of them. And there is one in a museum, and you can see how big they are, about the same size as a Volkswagen. So in other words, this is their evolutionary ancestor. I mean, do you have a better guess? No one does, at least so far. So maybe you can come up with a better guess and you become famous. And National Geographic will give you some money to go look for fossils, and you can become famous. Koala, now I included this because they are really well known. I have probably 6 or 7 stuffed not real, but stuffed koalas in my house, fake ones. And it says something about what I think about koalas. Plus, I have a couple of pictures. And they are in many ways unique. And again, we have no idea where they evolved from. They're classified as bears, but to me, they don't look much like a bear. And that picture I have in my study, by the way, same picture. And they are really cute. They're innocent. At least, well, they look innocent. And they live off primarily eucalyptus leaves. And if you think about evolution, what would evolution select for? A broader diet so they're more likely to survive. Not only do they live on one type of leaf, but there's 600 different eucalyptus trees, and they consume foliage from only 30 kinds. So evolution would expand the diet, and that way they'd be more likely to survive. But what do we find? Well, they're not expanded. And eucalyptus leaves are toxic to most animals. So their liver produces a unique enzyme that detoxifies the toxins. How did they survive until they had that enzyme? And you might wonder, why don't other animals evolve that enzyme, and then they can dine off eucalyptus leaves as well? Well, that's a problem for evolution. And how they subsist on a diet that's not only toxic, but it's very poor in nutrients, so poor that they have to spend much of their time sleeping or resting 8 to 22 hours a day. So they basically spend the rest of their time, by the way, my second graders define this better, What they do every day is sleep, eat, and poop. As for a third grader, and that's right. That's what they do. They eat, sleep, and poop. That's their life. And now I guess they spend time being hugged by tourists. It's a major tourist attraction in Australia for understandable reasons. In fact, that is really important for the tourist industry. People go to Australia. One major reason is to see animals you never see anywhere else in the world. And that's a good example. And how do they survive on these very non-nutritious leaves? Well, they have a 6-foot-long cecum. Now, you remember, they're only about this large. And they have a 6-foot-long cecum, the longest of any known mammal, the koala size. Now, elephants have longer, probably, but they're pretty big animals. And they have to have internal bacteria to digest the cellulose because they can't break down the cellulose very effectively. So the bacteria does the job. So they couldn't live until they had that bacteria. They have to have the bacteria to be able to subsist. And as I said, no fossil evidence exists. Lots of fossils exist, but no evidence. In fact, they think, since there's no fossil evidence in Australia, they think they must have evolved from the wombat, which lives somewhere else. And when you look at the wombat, I don't think it's a very good probability that they evolved from wombats, because there they are. Now, they're kind of a little bit alike, but not that much. But then where did the wombat evolve from? Maybe they evolved from koalas. Who knows? And they don't look like a koala at all, or koala. Some people pronounce them koalas. At all. They look like a rat, maybe, or a mouse, or a rodent of some type. But they are kind of cute. And turtles is the next animal we'll look at. And turtles is an animal we're all familiar with. And the problem here, again, is this shell preserves really, really well in the fossil record. In fact, we have lots of fossil shells. And guess what? No evidence of their evolution. The first fossil shell we have in the fossil record was just like those today. And there are many kinds of turtles. Sea turtle, quite different than a land turtle. And this is an adult, and you can see the fingers up here kind of give you an idea how small they are. This is full grown. Full grown. They're kind of cute. And then that's the one we're familiar with. And then there's an alligator snapping turtle, which don't make very good pets. So where did all these creatures evolve from? No evidence. And turtle shells are found way back in the fossil record, but no evidence of their evolution. And the platypus is probably one of the best examples. And it's a corundum for evolution. They're baffled as to where these critters could have come from. By the way, even the first, second graders love these pictures. They look at them and, is that real? And teachers told me, I can teach all day, and it's hard to keep these first graders interested. But you have managed to allow them to sit down for an hour and only squirm a little. So that's good. And they can learn something. They're the world's most puzzling animal. They're very strange. They have unique features and genes, which we'll talk about in a minute. They have traits typical of birds, mammals, reptiles, and who knows what else. This mysterious creature is so unusual. When a pelt was sent from Australia to United Kingdom in the 1700s, scientists were fully convinced, in fact, some of the leading anatomists, like Robert Knox, was fully convinced this is fake, produced by an Asian, tactful but talented Asian taxidermist. And of course, that wasn't the case. It's a semi-aquatic animal, lays eggs like a bird, has milk glands like a mammal, has a duckbill that resembles a glove, and it does, when you look at it, it really looks like it's a glove slipped onto its head. So if I were living back then, I would say, this is a fake. It's a glove just stuck on there, glued on there, put on there somehow because it just doesn't look like it belongs. Has a thick fur coat, and it's waterproofed, and it traps a layer of air to help keep the animal warm in cold water. And it lives in areas where the water is pretty cold. So it survives quite well. And its skeleton is like a reptile, tail like a beaver. It has an interclavicle bone in its shoulder girdle. And this is a reptile trait, which is found in no other marsupial or placental. So it's unique. And these are especially attractive when I look at evolution because how could this evolve? It just is nonsensical. The platypus and the echidna are the only, and I'll show you the echidna in a minute, are the only known mammals that do not dream while sleeping, as far as they know. And I'm not sure how they know, but if you have a dog, we had a dog, and I know they're dreaming because their tail will wag, they'll bark, their feet will like they're running. They're obviously dreaming. Anybody have a dog? Anybody notice that in your dogs? Any? They look like they're dreaming.
They will wake you up dreaming.
Yeah. Their dreams are pretty real. Now, I'm not sure how they know that about other animals, but some expert knew this, and he put this in the book that I read. Males have venomous ankle spurs that secrete toxins unique to platypus. They obviously must have a way of protecting themselves from their own toxins, and it produces severe pain and edema, the blood around the wound. And this protection system is one of the many unique traits that evolutionists they don't even try to explain where it came from. And one of the more intriguing things is as far as I know, all animals that reproduce either are X, humans are XX for a female and XY for a male. Birds, I think, are XZ, but they're pairs. The platypus, ironically, the male has 5 X chromosomes. So, pardon me, 5X produces a female, I'll get it. It is confusing. 5Y produces a male. No other animal has anything like that. Not even close. Again, I don't know of any animal that has anything but either X and Y or Z, what did I say? W and Z, I think it is, for some reptiles. But at any rate, and they're kind of cute. They're small. But is it possible to turn the lights off? We might be able to see those a lot better. Can we turn the lights off? Can you see them all right? You sure? Okay. It's fish-like. It looks like a fish, swims like a fish. I first saw these when I went to the museum at the University of Michigan, and they had a stuffed example, and since that day, I have been fascinated with this critter. Because it is a fascinating animal, and they're not that big. They're fairly small. And this animal, like all of them in this presentation, supports what I call, well, actually I don't, but somebody else does, calls it the message creation theory. That is, God is trying to give us a message that life did not evolve. How do you do that? You produce animals that just could not evolve. Just no way they could evolve. And therefore, he made these animals to basically tell us, look, life did not evolve. And it's obvious I hope it's obvious to all of you, and it should be obvious to other people, but I guess if you're committed to the Darwinian worldview, you just accept that. By the way, there are many people out there, I have a whole book on this, where I basically point out that for many people, science is the doorway to Christianity. It was for me. I was at one time an atheist. In studying science, what other conclusion could you make? You have to. When you study this stuff, you have to realize evolution doesn't explain it, and God does. And that to me is pretty clear. That's why we need to get this message in the churches. Because one problem, I cover this in my book, so many people bought into evolution, and that is not only tragic, but you really wonder, are you thinking? Are you looking at the natural world? how could you study the natural world and not conclude that indeed there's a creator out there? And he's telling us about himself when he creates 12 different kinds of turtles. God likes variety. So in God's creation, he's telling us something. And we need to get this message in the churches. And so just keep that in mind. And I find this fascinating. Somebody was just today asking me, how can you read all these books? Well, how could I not read all these books? Although I have to admit, and my wife will agree with you, I buy a lot of books intending to read them, and I just don't get to it. But they're there, and I pick them up every now and then. I'm working on a book on the Scopes trial, and as I was reading a book which I'm just working on now, I realized there's a lot of good information in there which is useful for my work on writing on the Scopes trial, which I think is fascinating. So message theory, it's like you have a fight with your husband, and he wasn't very nice today. So you go out and go do your shopping, you come back home, and there is a vase with some roses in it and a note. I wonder how that got there. I mean, do you think maybe the neighbor brought it over by mistake? What is the only explanation? Your husband got it for you. I mean, is there any other explanation? It should be obvious. And that, to me, is a good example of message theory. And there we go. The duck-billed platypus is floating around. And I could spend hours on this, but, we want to move on. And one feature which is really fascinating is they are so different, they need a new classification, monotremes. And the echidna, which I'll talk about in a minute, is the only other member of that group. And that doesn't look like it belongs either, but got to put it somewhere. And it has a bill, and the bill, as we looked at earlier, has a radio receiver. It's a radio receiver, except it doesn't pick up stations around here. It does pick up messages given by animals. It's called electroception, and it's used to locate prey. So it can move around by the ocean, stream, or river bottom, and then the animals are giving off radio signals, and then it is a receiver, electroception, picks up the signal, digs a hole, and there's dinner. And without this electroception, it wouldn't do very well. In fact, it wouldn't survive. So how did it survive until it had the electroception? That's a problem. And it uses a set of very specialized sensory cells designed to respond to weak electrical fields. And its electroception system is the most sensitive of all known. Now, some other animals, bats, have a similar set, but these are by far the most sensitive. 40,000 electroceptors are in the animal's bill, which looks like it's dead. There's not much in there, but there is a lot. And it can allow it to distinguish between living and non-living objects very effectively, so it doesn't dig holes for no reason. There's a good reason for digging holes. Doesn't waste its time fruitlessly. Now the panda, and again, there's nothing else like it. That is supposed to be part of the bear family. But it doesn't fit very well. It kind of looks like a bear, but there's some intriguing things about this critter. And they weigh about, when they're fully grown, 100 pounds. About 5 feet long, so they're pretty good size. They can climb trees, swim, and they have front-facing eyes, which many animals don't have. Large eyes, which makes them cute. And these are a bunch of baby pandas, which are about the size of a teddy bear. So they are really adorable. By the way, pandas are critical for China's environment, and it's also critical for their economy. And so they were going extinct, which I'll explain why in a minute, and they realized that it's a major, in fact, when I looked this up on the internet, all I got was Chinese websites that were trying to get me to go over there to look at them. So there's a lot of information, but it's mostly advertisements. But that's where I got these pictures from. It said something like, would you like to spend time with these adorable animals? Come to China. It's only $4,000 or whatever it costs. And spend a week in the motel there, and you too can hold these animals. And lots of people do. It's a huge tourist industry. And I could see if you had some money, didn't know what to do with, and liked to travel, there you go. And they're unique. They're herbivores, okay, but yet they have the equipment to digest meat. So you wonder why? Well, that's what it is. Their diet consists almost entirely of bamboo, and cellulose does not produce much energy. In fact, it doesn't dissolve very well, period. If you have things wrapped in cellophane, that's cellulose. So they don't dissolve very well at all. But in order to get nutrients enough, they have to, again, eat almost constantly, and they, as well, eat, sleep, and poop. That's their life. That's what they do. And no evidence of their evolution. We have found, they claim 8 million years ago, but you can throw those dates out. But nonetheless, they claim that they're pretty old, and yet they haven't evolved at all based on what we have found. They have sharp teeth and digestive tract of carnivores, but yet they primarily eat, of course, bamboo. And this is one of the most intriguing things. They have a 1-day window a year for a female to conceive naturally. 1-day window. And so that's why they were going extinct. Because unless you had really sexually aggressive males, how you get that 1 day, I don't know. Now, evolution certainly, if it was a 2-day window, it would double the reproduction. Just one more day. But no, they have a 1-day window. 3-day, you could triple the reproduction. And that's one reason they were going extinct.
What if it's a leap year?
I don't know. They would really have a problem. Yeah.
You said that's why they went extinct, but it's always been like that, right? So what was the difference between when they weren't going extinct and when they were?
Well, they were never that common, period. But then hunting, of course, that didn't help, and a few other things. So why is there so many common ones today? Well, artificial insemination. That's why they got the herd to increase enormously, because that 1-day window, that's not going to work. I'm not sure if they really have any evidence that that was a 2-day window a million years ago. I don't know. But that would be...
The Gregorian calendar, the Mayan calendar, I don't even know the calendar.
Yeah, maybe they use a different calendar. Now, for you gals, your window is, I think, a week, 5 days? What's your window that you can conceive? Come on, you should.
It's like 1 to 2 days a month.
1 to 2 days a month?
I think so.
I think it was longer than that, because Catholics practice the birth control where you know when your period is and you just don't have sex during that time period. Of course, I know that doesn't always work well, but anyways, that's I understand it's, and I really haven't talked to my wife about this recently. There's no reason to, but I think it's 3 or 4 days or 5 days, but it's longer than a couple days, as far as I know. But anybody, where's our women? You should. I guess you haven't had to worry about that in a while, but. Okay, a quote, and I thought this quote said it better than I could, and there's the source in case you're curious. No one really knows how the giant panda evolved. Few fossils of its relatives have been found, so a few fossils have been found, so its lineage is almost as hotly debated as that of humans. And I find that really fascinating. Almost as hotly debated as that of humans. I remember when I gave a lecture once, and I talked about the fossil record, and someone said, one of the best fossil records we have is of human evolution. I said, what do you mean we don't have a good fossil record? One of the best is of humans. Well, that's of course not true, but that's what they said. And they think the first ancestor of giant pandas probably lived in Europe, but nobody knows. And red panda, that is supposed to be a panda. It looks to me like a fox or a dog. And now I would say if they theorize that evolved from dogs, that's more logical. But for several reasons, because it is a marsupial, I understand, well, maybe not. It's what? They eat bamboo too, these guys? I don't know much about red pandas, but I found them intriguing. And they are cute. Some theorize this evolved from a raccoon. So echidnas, there's echidnas. They're also called spiny anteaters, and these are really cute guys. There you go. Well, maybe not so cute. I have some other pictures. Their beak is like a hummingbird. And there you can see when they fold up, and that's how they protect themselves. They're a weird animal. And they look like a baby porcupine. They have a long, thin bill, and we'll look at that in a minute. And it's designed, the animal is designed to consume a diet of termites, ants, insect larvae, and sometimes worms. They also use electroception to locate their prey. But they're quite different, as you will see, from a duck-billed platypus. They don't look like a bird, but yet they lay eggs like a bird. And when in danger, they curl up into a small ball, which makes sense. And they can also partly bury themselves, so they protect themselves. And there you get a better picture because you can see this is their snout. And at the end of this is one of the most sensitive smells of any animal. They're really good smellers. And kind of cute, I guess. I don't know. Are they cute? Maybe not. But unique. And they have no idea where they could evolve from. I mean, you can't even guess. I guess if you did guess, you probably would say a porcupine, maybe, but they're very different from porcupines. So, squirrels, and I included that because we have a lot of squirrels in our backyard, and I thought, well, gee, I should look and see what they say about squirrels. And I found out there are two types, well, many, but two main types of squirrels where I live in this area, and they are the tree squirrels, which live in trees, and the ground squirrels, which live in the ground. Okay? And I noticed they don't leave for the winter. How do they survive? And as I read more about them, I found them really intriguing because, they're not very interesting. Well, I started to read and I found out they are interesting. They thrive in almost every habitat. Hot areas, cold areas, they seem to do well. Rainforest, desert, they thrive pretty much everywhere, including in cities. Big cities, they thrive. Large eyes, they have excellent vision. They can jump from one limb to another of the same tree or other trees, and they balance themselves, and a key to balance, there you go. They are rodents, by the way. The key to balance is their tail, which I'll show you in a minute. There is 273 squirrel species in North America, and they have few enemies except cars. They're well designed for their terrestrial and arboreal life, arboreals in trees. They're one of the few mammals, aside from primates, that have color vision. They can see colors, and this is fairly easy to measure because they respond to colors where most animals don't. Doesn't matter what color it is, they respond to the object, but not the color. And a tail is central, as I mentioned. This is how they balance on telephone wires. And the tail's function is similar to how a tightrope walker uses a pole. So they use the tail to balance like a pole. Its tail is about 40% of its body length, and it protects their face and body from dogs, raptors, and other predators. Works quite well. It's protection. Also keeps them warm at night, which you would expect. And the tail blood vessels allow it to serve as a cooling unit and as a warming unit. And the blood vessels, the circulation changes to allow them to retain heat or lose heat. So again, no evidence of their evolution. They think they evolved about 36 million years ago from some hypothetical, more primitive rodent. And they have some nearly complete skeletons, which they claim, I like these dates, by the way, they claim are 36 million years old, surprisingly like that of a modern tree squirrel. You mean in 36 million years they haven't changed at all? 36 million years, they must have some changes. As far as we can tell, they're identical. So I like these long, I don't believe they're that old, but on the other hand, I like these long ages because, come on, there must be some changes. In 36 million years, there's some evolution. But from what we know, there's no evolution. Its bones, from judging by its bones, they're identical to modern squirrels, as far as we can tell. And then the kiwi is another critter, which is kind of interesting. They are stymied evolutionists. The egg is here, and you can see that the egg is almost as large as the bird. And there is a hen's egg, and there's a kiwi egg. They're monstrous. Don't ask me about laying the egg. I don't know how they do it. I guess they survive. But they're a flightless bird, terrestrial bird. They're found only in New Zealand. And Darwin used this as an example of a loss of function due to evolution, because they have non-functional wings. Well, they have wings that are really very functional. And what do you think the wings do? Balance. If you look at their legs, I think there's a picture here of their legs. If you look at their legs, how in the world is this thing going to walk on those legs? It's got to balance given the legs that they have, which that's the only way they can walk on their legs. Otherwise, they'd fall over. A little wind comes along, they'd fall over, which if they're carrying an egg would be even worse. And British scientists concluded this animal was impossible. It was a fiction. In fact, they said this is like a mermaid and a unicorn. It could not be true. And a platypus, yeah. So, and they have whiskers like a cat. It burrows like a groundhog. It's unlike, as it's obvious, any other bird or mammal. Its nostrils are located at the tip of its long, thin, pliable, curved beak. Its beak is richly endowed as a sensory device, as an organ of smell. And considering its diet, you can see where the sense of smell would have to be on its long beak. They eat insects and so on. Lays eggs like a bird, but of course doesn't have the tail or wings of a bird. Its body surface is more like fur than feathers. And so some thought it was a mammal, but it's not quite feathers. And there you can see they're really cute animals. And this gives you a good idea of their beak. And here is where the sense of smell is. And they're pretty affectionate little guys. And the eggs are incubated by males. They don't lay them, but they incubate the eggs. And not females, as is true of most birds. The males usually are on their own, so they incubate the eggs and then they take off. In the last group, one gal said, yeah, just like men. Men are all the same, even male birds are the same. So I guess she had some bad experiences with a guy didn't stick around for. Anyways, the males are usually on their own. They leave, though, to get food, and though they do return and care for the egg, incubate it, and when the egg hatches, then they go on their own. Stephen Jay Gould from Harvard said the greatest of kiwi oddities centers upon its reproduction. I would say the other oddities are pretty great, too. But Gould said that, and that's the egg. As you can see, it's huge. For these and many other reasons, the kiwi is the world's most unbird-like bird. It's a biological oddity, known worldwide for its strange features and behavior. And the last one I'll do is the Venus flytrap. And these are intriguing because the design is unique. They trap insects, but of course, so the wind doesn't cause these folds, the leaves, to close. They have a special system here where you have to trigger at least 3 of these before it closes. So wind, etc., doesn't close it unnecessarily. So if the ant or bug is walking around, fly is walking around, once it triggers 3 of these, it closes very rapidly. And then it secretes digestive juices, and then, of course, there's dinner. And where do you suppose these are found? There's a whole bunch of them. Pretty much throughout the United States. They really do well because they can live off insects, but if there's no insects around, they have roots and they can do well just like any other plant. They don't need to digest flies. They don't need to do that. They can survive fine even if there's no flies. It's just kind of nice to have another food source. Now, where are they found? Right here. in South Carolina. It's the only place in the whole world they're found. Now, evolutionists have a problem because they're so successful, they do so well, why haven't they spread? Nobody knows. Evolutionists don't know. But, and I'm not sure, creationists, I guess, say, well, somebody carried them over from the ark. I don't know how they explain it, but and they landed in this part of the country, and that's where they are found. But now they are imported throughout, of course, much of the country, but they're grown here. I suppose they can grow somewhere else, but they're found normally here, and that's all. And that's the end of my presentation. So.